Well, greetings everyone, and and welcome to another Thursday night with the Sports Crib. Here with the boys, Bill and I. Demetrius will be in a little. No, as a matter of fact, Demetrius will not be in tonight, but we will have Mike will be in a little bit later. Mr. Jeffrey Fann will also be joining us. So we'll talk about the Final Four and a lot to talk about in the NFL. Um, Bill, how are you doing this evening?
It's a very good evening. We get to talk sports and we get to spend time with each other, and then at some point, Mike and Jeffrey fans. So, what more can one ask?
Uh, I have to find out where your email goes because I send you and Demetrius together, and Demetrius gets it, but you don't.
Well, I got the second one. I
I'm,
know
not,
I didn't get the first one.
I, 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 I'm going to have to investigate that. Maybe it's some, what is it, Area 54? Yeah, but
51, I think. I think we can get
51?
Studio 54. Maybe
Still,
it's a combination of the
I guess I'm really showing my age, right? Studio
two.
54, right? The disco ball, Sister
Oh yes,
Sledge, the
the
whole
Latin
nine
Quarters,
yards.
yes, all that stuff, man. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, there are a lot of things that have happened during my time here, and especially when it comes to the way that we interact with each other. Now, the subject that I'm going to talk about is probably a subject that for many years would have been very hush hush and in the closet, things that your parents talked about, but you weren't exposed to. Those things didn't exist, or they existed in a veil of, I believe, so different terms. Hermaphrodite is one that comes to mind when I was young, and so there were some that were not quite as nice. But I'm looking at the sports world and the political world, and I'm looking at some of the states like Texas and Florida, Florida, for instance. There's a bill that has been signed by the governor. You can't say gay. I mean, that's the context. I mean, there are other things attached, but anyway, um, it seems. I guess this was last Tuesday, and it kind of uh, went under my radar because, like I said, these are things like you don't usually get a chance to talk about. So, Leah Thompson became the first openly trans uh, gender swimmer to claim a victory in the top U.S. college championship. Now, there's a big thing over in England also about a rower that has went through the same procedure as Miss Thomas, and is going to be competing against an all-time great European rower in the women's division. So, should male to female athletes be allowed to compete in women's sports?
Well, if we're going to allow them to compete at all, and the answer is
You're
yes.
kind of muffled. You kind of
Oh,
muffled, Bill. I'm not
oh,
sure exactly what it is.
sorry. Hold on. We're trying to figure out what's going on with that. Uh,
See, I kind of equate this almost to don't ask, don't tell, but it's right there in your face. I mean, you know that there has been surgery involved, as well as psychological and other things, of course. But in a combat sport such as boxing, we know that in the service of our country we have transgender people. Um, but I mean, okay, what would you think about a female to male boxer fighting Tyson Fury, for instance? Now we can't hear you at all. Now you're muted. You muted yourself.
Okay, how about now?
Okay, now we can hear you.
So there are strict international guidelines. Now the IOC isn't everything, right? It's the International Olympic Committee. There are other sporting bodies, like you mentioned Tyson Fury. The IOC has no purview over that. They have no purview over MMA. They have no purview over professional athletics at all, really. I mean, though at this point the IOC is really a professional organization, but they still want to pretend they're not. So I can tell you the IOC's guidelines, and they're fairly stringent. Um, Up until 2015, they required that there be some sort of actual genital surgery. They stopped the genital surgery requirements after 2015 and then got rid of what's called medically unnecessary procedures or treatments. But still, you have to meet the guidelines themselves. In the Olympics in Tokyo, we saw the first transgender intersex athletes to compete, and uh, a young woman from New Zealand was the first, if you're just going chronologically, and Laurel Hubbard was in Olympic lifting. What we have to remind ourselves is this is a teeny tiny percentage of, well, obviously athletes, but of the population, period. So a lot of this sort of doom and gloom you hear people putting out there is at the very least overblown, right? This is a very small subset of both the athletic and the Earth's population. That's the first thing. Second of all, uh, while there are certain things in terms of skeletal structure, certain things in terms of if a person goes through puberty and then makes their transition later, there are yes, there are certain things that will have happened that will allow them to still have the musculoskeletal structure, some of it at least, retained even after hormone treatments may have happened later to you know bring down some of their level of musculature. So it is a groundbreaking and important thing to not deny a very marginalized set of individuals a chance to one be visible and two to be celebrated because for the most part transgendered individuals are one not very visible for the most part and two definitely not celebrated. I mean, I don't have to bring up all the statistics, but pick a bad number, whether it be homelessness, whether it be not completing high school, whether it be malnutrition, whether it be being a victim of violent crime. I mean, any bad number you can think of in America, transgender individuals are either number one or very close to number one in all of the bad numbers you can imagine. So that's the first thing. And if we're talking about ceasing the marginalization of marginalized individuals. And as a marginalized individual, I generally root for the marginalized to be less marginalized. Uh, I want us to be careful about what we do and how we do some of these things. Okay, so that same Leah, right, that we're talking about, got absolutely smoked in some of those, in some of those same, like this was the only race that Leah competed in, got absolutely smoked in some of those same races. I think people are assuming, based on gender norms and things they think about men and whatever else, that they're just going to run roughshod over the competition. But there's nothing to support that in terms of statistics. There's nothing to support that in terms of what we know of the science, right? There are, in some specific sports, some specific advantages. But here's something that has been known for a long time. Once you go from like muscular explosion, like things that happen in a short amount of time, things that happen in seconds or a few minutes, once you go into endurance and especially hyper endurance athletics, the difference between the peak men's performance and the peak women's performance shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. And I foresee a time when in ultra marathons, women and men's times will be identical, and in some cases, women will have the better times. And I'll explain why. So, for those who have ever been involved in long distance running competitions, and I have done a half marathon once, and that was more than enough for me, thank you. But women have what's called a mixed metabolism, meaning that constantly they're metabolizing both the stored fats in their body system and they're constantly metabolizing glycol, the blood sugar. Men do not. Men are burning glycol until they're done. There's no blood sugar left, and then in an experience called hitting the wall, their metabolism has to switch over to burning body fat. For those who have not had the experience, let me tell you, it is not a pleasant experience. So, in hyper endurance events, there will come a time, I'm predicting, when I think women will have times that are just as good or possibly even superior to top tier male athletes in hyper endurance events, ultra marathons, etc.
Well, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I think what 2 years ago we had our first woman ranger, and I believe it was 6 years ago that the Green Berets start
Yep,
letting women into their
the
training.
selection process. Yep, yep.
Mr. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Good,
Uh,
good, good. Glad to be here. Glad to be with you, gentlemen.
we're talking about something that back in our day, like I was kind of talking about in the prelogue, was kind of an unspoken or unbroken boundary. And this particular incident what I'm talking about here, last 2 weeks ago, we had the first transgender woman win a championship, a major U.S. championship. So this brought about an uproar in England because there is a transgender woman there who wants to compete, but they're saying that they don't want her to compete, even though she has undergone the same procedures as Miss Thomas, the young lady that I was referring to earlier. What is your view on transgender uh, male to female athletes competing against other women?
Well, I just have just a very few statements on that. My first statement is, what makes him or her, first of all. And then I'm going to defer to one of the people that I listen to, Mr. D.L. Hughley. And what D.L. Hughley said about what's the one that was married to the Kardashian lady, Bruce Jenner? He
Yes,
said that Bruce Jenner is now says he's a woman, but when he goes to the doctor and the doctor says his prostate is enlarged, what does that say about who he is?
but they,
So
but
I
he doesn't have a prostrate anymore.
well that see well now we're getting into the science of it, and I don't know what it takes for a man to say that they're a woman. I don't know if it's cutting, snipping, whatever it is, but it's nothing that I really really look at. I mean, if you, I really have not a whole lot of comments about it because it's
Uh,
nothing that I've really spent much time on.
well, now, suppose you had a transgender woman come out and well, the other way, a woman that had been changed into a man come out and try for the twins. How
Okay.
would you feel?
Well, I would say not only try for the Twins. How about you try for the Vikings? Let's see you come out and be a
Yeah,
middle linebacker for the Vikings. Let's see you come out and be. I mean, this. I don't want to be negative about these kind of things, but of course, I have personal feelings that. See, I grew up in a church just like you, James, and there would be people in the church. My mom was the choir director. And there would be people, I would hear mom and grandma, oh boy, look at him, he's switching. Well, he's trying to switch, he's trying to sway it. So I mean, these type of things have always been part of the Lexium, and it's there. I mean, it doesn't bother me. It does. I mean, it's to each their own as far as I'm concerned. So from that standpoint, but when you're talking about competing and when you're talking about eliminating, women that are, see, for when I was in high school, women's sports really, and like James, and I don't want to always consider, me and James, because it makes me seem like people say I'm ancient. Somebody said I was archaic. Somebody said,
I,
I had to cut them off at that
I,
point. But going to school, it's like when we played a game in school, we played a game called bombardment. And bombardment was you just try to eliminate whatever person with the ball. And that's what we're hearing them saying about Russia and what's going on now. So to morph back, to our what we're talking about here, women just really didn't play sports when I grew up. I mean, women, it was just such an afterthought. And now there's a woman now that her family grew up with me. There's the Banham family. Okay, the girl, her aunt was in the Sounds of Blackness with me. Her mother and father were policemen, and her father was Denny Green's bodyguard for the Minneapolis police. And the daughter, Rachel Banham, is one of the top basketball players at the University of Minnesota, plays for the Lynx now, played at Connecticut, top basketball player. Is back with the Lynx. And, when I came up, that would have been impossible. And I'm so glad to see it. I'm so glad to see, Rachel, knowing her as a baby, because her aunts, my wife's best friends, they'd be over here for picnics. They'd be over here to talk about. And so I'm glad to see women get in it. And I think they should have their day. And I love WNBA basketball. I never forget, we went to Atlanta Lynx and won. I called my cousin in Atlanta. I said, "You see the basketball game?" "Oh, ain't no basketball going on now." I said, No. It's a championship going on. We won in Atlanta. And now his team, Atlanta Dream, is good. Now he's calling me, talking about Atlanta Dream. Now he calls me. "Oh, did you see?" I was trying to. So it's great that we can do this. And so this mixing of the genders, it's beyond me. I don't, but I don't put anybody. My dad said, don't underestimate anybody. Don't underestimate nobody. One of the first fights I had was with my brother. And I said, he's 4 years younger than me. I'm going to whoop you. All of a sudden, he thought he could whip me. I said, no. But what happened was he's a lefty. And so when I started throwing a punch, he was hitting me every time I threw a punch. So it turned into a ground game. So and mom had to break it up. And I realized why nobody would fight Marvin Hagler. That's why he had to wait 50 fights before he got a shot. But to morph back, I think the women's sports. Matter of fact, the Final Four is here. I'm going to take my granddaughter to some of the events Saturday with the women's Final Four here at the auditorium. And I think it's awesome. And I think for men to get involved, if you're a man, be one. And that's just my thoughts.
For many years, that has been the norm. And no, and I say that seriously. I mean, because like I was saying to Bill, that there are a lot of things that were normal when I was growing up that nowadays, are totally acceptable. There are things that, that I mean, who would have thought back in my day, back when I was in 7th grade, who would have thought of same-sex marriage? So I mean, just so the things have certainly moved along, and as far as socially and
they've moved along, James, but have they evolved? I mean, is this what evolution and evolving? I mean, it's moved along, but you would think in life.
But see, that would be a discussion for Monday, whether or not we move along, and evolving. That would be a great subject for Monday, Mr. Scott. I'm glad that you brought it up, though. But now. I wanted to ask you guys, and like I said, I don't get into baseball much, but there was a ruling that they're going to keep the players, on base players, in for extra innings. Mr. Scott, what did you think of that rule? I mean, as a baseball purist, I mean, you played with Satchel Paige. Well, maybe not that far, but anyway. But
Willie Mays, but not Satchel Paige.
But I mean, what do you think? I mean, trying to speed up baseball. I mean, is there such a thing?
No, it's foolishness. I mean, they continue to do these things. I don't know if I ever told you, James. I was watching a Twins game. And it was a rainout. And so what they did was they just played a game that was at Wrigley Field in, I don't know, 1968, 69. And it was in the 10th inning. And this pitcher from Cincinnati, Jim Maloney, was pitching against the Cubs. And so he was pitching a no-hitter. And it was like 100 degrees out there. And he had on this wool. I mean, he had a wool uniform. And he was sweating like 4 dogs, as my dad would say. Sweating like 4 dogs. And the announcer said, well, Mr. Maloney has thrown 170 pitches now. And we're in the 10th inning. And he's trying. And so in the 10th inning, he has to face Billy Williams, Ron Santo, and Ernie Banks to get his no-hitter. After throwing 170 pitches in 170-degree weather, and he gets them out and gets his no-hitter. So, I mean, to me, that's when I played. I played with a guy, Walter Kennedy. He never went anywhere because he loved, other stuff more than he loved baseball. But we played a game where he struck out. Every out was a strikeout. It was on the news that night I got home. Now, there was a few walks. There was some errors. But every out was a strikeout. I mean, to me that's baseball. It's wills. It's not just, they're trying to get every edge they can. So all these rules to me are, I'll watch it, but I don't watch it like I used to watch.
Yeah, Bill, we've kind of talked about this in bits and pieces. I talked about my uncle sitting around, making up his scoreboard before the game,
Yeah.
and following the Pirates. I mean, nowadays, even I don't have like a baseball game. You know, I, to be truthful, I'd rather watch a volleyball game. There's more
Women's
action.
volleyball, especially. Yes, I would
See,
too.
there you go, Mister Scott. You go. Well, we already rated MA, so it's okay. It's all right. You know, but good thing we don't have Dr. Casey on this show. But anyway, Bill, back to baseball here. Is there any such thing as speeding up baseball?
I mean, theoretically, you could speed up baseball around the margins, right? But it's an untimed game. That is both its appeal and its greatest weakness. So, for a generation of younger sports fans who are used to constant action, it is a struggle unless they come from a family where people love baseball, or some do. You know, it's not literally genetic, the love of baseball, but it certainly is a very much a nurture. It's not a nature kind of thing. My father's favorite sport when he was growing up was baseball. By the time I came along, he had sort of shifted more over to football. But he'd grown up, you know, in the Depression, listening to Bob Prince and like all the great announcers of that era, Red Barber and all these others. And he remembers when Joe Garagiola had just retired and was a young guy, right, just starting out on radio, and working with Jack Buck at one point and people like that. But the the baseball was the dominant sport in America from before the turn of the 20th century, right? So, thanks to the Civil War, Southerners got exposed to it. It was a northern sport, a regional sport prior to the Civil War. And prisoners of war is through so northern prisoners of war in southern camps would be seen playing the game, and the southern captors would say, "What are you guys doing?" Right? And they learned it from them, and then the other way around, right? And so when southern prisoners of war were captured, and in northern camps, once again, they would see their guards, when bored and hit or whatever, playing this game, and so they took it back home with them, and the South embraced it. So it went from being this regional sport, mostly in like Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, three or four northern states. Suddenly went from being regional to national due to the Civil War. And by 30, 20, 20, 30 years later, it was the American sport, right? It was up there with horse racing and boxing, which were the two primary sports, and wrestling was up there too, believe it or not, at one point.
At the time, those were the only two sports that I believe you could actually watch on TV. You had Friday night fights. You had Gillette Cavalcade of Sports.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And see, I'm going way back. Yeah, but I mean, but you
Bring it
had that
on.
you had that on Friday nights. Then you had your game, like every day, like Thursday or Tuesday, and you could almost, well, you could. I mean, because on certain days you had 25-cent hot dogs. On
Yep.
certain days they gave away pennants. On certain days they gave away these little miniature gloves and balls that
Right. The
really
little mini
gave to
helmets. Yeah. Right.
but most of us, I mean, until I got the little league, usually the kid that was out in the field left his glove out there, and we traded gloves. I mean,
Use that.
yeah, I mean, and I mean, a lot of us, played baseball without gloves. I mean, until your parents decide, well, maybe he's got enough upside the head if he's the
Yeah.
shortstop, or you've gotten I mean, I remember when we literally used to play baseball with like the big balls, anything that we could get our hands
Anything.
on,
Yep.
so but yeah, I mean, there's not that kind of dedication to the sport anymore. anymore, and
I
not
Because
think
only
money is involved. Now you have to have money. I mean, my dad used to take us, man, he would drop us off at the old Met Stadium, me and my brother and a couple friends, with enough money to get a hot dog and a pop, a double header, because they would have a free double
yeah,
header tickets at the gas station. And he said, look, don't buy your hot dog until after the first game. Then you buy your hot dog and the pop. Don't buy it until after the first game's over. And we'd stay out there all day.
Yep.
We would stay out there all day. And the very first, that's why I love the Yankees now, because there was no Twins. And that's the whole thing about Minnesota in general, and Minneapolis in sports. This was a flyover city. This was cold Omaha. This was nothing until the sports came. This was really absolutely nothing until they had sports. Nobody paid any attention to it. And then, when I was a real little kid, and my dad used to take my brother to see the Lakers. But see, they were gone in about 1954, but they would come back and play exhibition games here. With George Mikan was like Will Chamberlain back then. Nobody's really heard of George Mikan, but he was like Will Chamberlain. And when they got Elgin Baylor, oh man, when they got it, and he played here 1 year and left. But the first baseball game, we could only see the Packers and the Yankees. That's what we saw as a kid. The first game my dad takes me to is the Yankees. And we go to the batting practice, everything. Man, I look out there at number 7, Mickey Mantle. Number 8, number 9, Roger Maris. Number 8, Yogi Berra, Hector Lopez. I mean, Moose Gowron, Tom Tresh, Whitey Ford. I mean, to me, it's almost like a dream now that I was actually there to see that. But that's what really made the Twin Cities and baseball. And then the All-Star game. Oh, me and my buddies, they used to have 2 All-Star games the first 2 years. There was 2 games. And we would have parties. They would come to my house. My mom would make hot dogs and pop and stuff. But what I loved was the National League, man. Oh, man. Willie Mays, Willie Stargell, Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson. Oh, my. We were just like, man, this is. And we would watch that and go out and play until nighttime. Go play baseball until nighttime. But
there was no such thing as innings. You played until the street lights came on.
And I think that's the biggest difference is there's no more kids playing pickup baseball. If kids are playing baseball, it's structured. It's a league game. Kids don't just get a bunch of their friends together, figure out who has some equipment and who can pretend to have some equipment and just figure out a game on their own.
Jeffrey, we're talking about another sport that the ACC usually excels in, and that's baseball. We were just talking a little bit there about baseball and the upcoming season. But since I have you here, what's the upcoming season looking like for the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, in baseball, like you said, James, the ACC is typically very deep. Um, it's usually right there behind the SEC in most years. As the number 2 baseball conference out there, and this year is no difference. Virginia is off to a really hot start, and they had that run in the middle of the decade when they won the national championship, made the series. And we're the ACC's first college baseball title since like 1955 or something, with Wake Forest, and they seem to have a really strong team. Notre Dame is off to a fast start. Georgia Tech got out of the gate pretty quick, won a series at Georgia, and they've kind of backed up since then, but they've got a lot of offensive firepower. at Georgia Tech. Clemson started the year like 14-0 or something, and has struggled here lately. But when you look at you look at Virginia, you look at Notre Dame, they've got really good teams, and those are two of the ones. And I would look towards NC State. They had the bad luck in the College World Series last year with COVID, got off to a slow start, but they're starting to come along too. So I mean, the ACC is definitely gonna have teams that are going to be in the running to have a chance to reach Omaha, and it'll be a really competitive uh, year in the ACC baseball. I mean, they may not have like a Vanderbilt or a team quite like Texas. Vanderbilt's always seems to be up there, but they'll have teams that'll have an opportunity to make real noise this year.
Yeah, and we're a place where we usually see the ACC are also represented along with the usual suspects here, and that's the women's Final Four. Uh, Mr. Scott was mentioning that the women's Final Four is there in Minneapolis. What's the outlook for the ACC women's next year?
Well, you mean in the Final Four or?
Well, the Final Four and next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think ACC women's basketball has really come a long way too, and it's one of the deeper conferences out there in women's basketball. Louisville is in the Final Four. I mean, unfortunately, they're drawing South Carolina and Don Staley's team, so it's going to be a tall order for them to get past them. But they built a really strong program at Louisville. NC State. Um, unfortunately, could talk on this for a while. How they were the number one seed in the East and ended up playing a road game based in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Um, you know, with UConn, but they're also a program with some staying power and really in good position going forward. They made it to the Elite Eight. Notre Dame, since the retirement of Muffet McGraw, they struggled a little bit, but now you see them being on an upward trajectory. Same with Virginia Tech, also had a pretty good season. Georgia Tech's made back-to-back NCAA tournaments with Nell Fortner, but I think you really have to look at Notre Dame and especially Louisville and NC State. They're going to be top 10 team women programs for the foreseeable future. I think Louisville could be the one that could break through and maybe deliver a national championship, but probably not this year. I think Don Staley's she's got it going too well at South Carolina, and they're too good. So I don't see it happening this year, but they're going to be a factor in the future.
Mr. Scott, you got a dog in that race?
Not really. I'm gonna try to get to a lot of the events. They're going to have a lot of things at the Civic Center and downtown. I'm going to take my granddaughter to see these things. And no, I really don't. I mean, I just think the women's game is just really, it's just so exciting on the college level, the pro level. And like I was saying earlier, our good neighbor Rachel Banham, who played at Connecticut, and now she's with the Lynx and University of Minnesota. I don't know if I'll make it to a game, but I'm definitely going to go to some of the experience things they have. I'm going to take my granddaughter to that.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
good. But
Bill,
was that UConn NC State game maybe the best game of the whole March? One of the two or three best games of all of March. That was a great game.
you want to finish up the subject of women's basketball there, Bill? Final Four?
So when I was growing up in Norfolk, Virginia, we used to go to Old Dominion's campus to watch Nancy Lieberman, Amy Nissen, Jen Tremblay, Angela Kottman. Then Annie Donovan joined them towards the end of that, or towards not even the end, I guess the middle of that dynastic run. Melina Dixon. I mean, yeah, I've been watching women's basketball since I was a child, and the things that you notice One is you talk about sharing the ball, and you talk about sort of ball dominance and how certain players once the ball goes to them, they're not leaving. You don't see that in the women's game. You don't see people sort of getting the ball and just clear it out. I got this. Like you don't see that. You don't see all the ISO ball. You don't see all of the like a hero ball or whatever thing they use. So that's one thing. To me, I like ball movement. I like people passing it. I like post injury passing. Right? So if you still want to see uh, the game played unselfishly, that's one of the things I enjoy about watching the women's game. So and it's a very compelling. Obviously, not some of the knock you over stuff that we saw happening on the men's side in this Final Four. I mean, this is a little more. There's a couple of teams that were lower seeds, but not not as low as we were seeing. Almost saw in whatever. I mean, we got an 8 seed. We had a 15 versus an 8 for the first time on the men's side in the history of the tournament. Well, since it expanded out to having a 15 seed, and so the women's side is a little more predictable. I think most people's brackets are a little more intact because generally the blue blood programs, the more established programs, of course, obviously we are down to blue blood programs on the mid side too, but the higher seeds, the better programs usually prevail even in the lower levels, even in the beginning rounds of the tournament, as opposed to finally fighting their way to the top later in the tournament like on the men's side. But yes, I enjoy watching the men's game. I remember Dawn Staley very clearly in her playing career, watching her, develop. And of course, Philadelphia, right? Philadelphia area girl. I'm obviously born in the area. So it's good to see her career and her develop and her, go through having her playing career and then her assistant coaching and then her head coaching career and now being one of the great coaches of all time. So yes, I'm a fan. I've enjoyed watching this game grow and develop and hoping to get to the point where they don't have to keep trying to, you know, fight their way into the spotlight. I hope they'll be given the spotlight that they so richly deserve without having to, do anything extraordinary because being great should be enough.
Well, they could certainly. I think Madison Square Gardens for rent. They got rid of that whatever it was. That. Uh, but anyway, Jeffrey. When we first talked about the tournament starting, you weren't as quite as optimistic, except about one team, and that team has prevailed, but it seems like they have to play their old nemesis.
Yes.
What's your take on the tourney? Of course, seeing two ACC tournaments and teams in the Final Four, but unfortunately in the same bracket. What's your thoughts there, Jeffrey? And who do you think's going to prevail?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think that North Carolina and Duke have never met in an NCAA tournament. Um, and this game, I mean, I've heard some people say that it could be the biggest Final Four game since Magic and Bird, and uh, I've read about that game before, and I don't know if it's going to quite draw the TV ratings that one did, but there is with the amount of um, pressure that's in this game for especially I think on the Duke side. I mean, here you are with this ultra talented team, Mike Krzyzewski's last game, and you're facing a team that you just played a couple few weeks ago that thumped you on your home court. And dominated you in the second half in a game that was super huge at the time. They're in Cameron Indoor Stadium, so I think North Carolina is the one team that goes into facing Duke, and there won't be that intimidation factor because they've played them so many times. They know them so well. I really think that was the worst thing that could happen to Duke, to be honest, was to see North Carolina on the other side of the court. And Duke is more talented. I mean, they've got probably 4 or 5 guys that are going to be in the NBA, and North Carolina is really talented too. But I mean, Duke is the most talented team in the field. They just weren't playing like it through most of the year. Um, they would either overwhelm their ACC opponents, or if they were in a close game, would struggle. They lost, games that you just really had no business losing. Losing to Virginia at home and losing to Miami at home, and getting really beat by Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament. North Carolina, you know, beating them by double digits on the road. But when Duke finally started playing to their talent level, and I still don't think they're a great defensive team, but they've become a pretty good one, and really were tough at the end of the game against Texas Tech, really tough against Michigan State, Arkansas. You know, you saw them put it into a next gear when that game got a little bit close in the second half. Um, so I mean, I would favor Duke going into this game just on their raw talent, and then seeing Paolo Banchero, really starting to assert himself. That's something that North Carolina, as good as they've been in the tournament with Caleb Love and Manick and Baycock, you know, no team in the country can match what Banchero can do when he sets his mind to what he wants to do on the basketball court. So I expect a close game, a competitive game, but I think Duke just has a few too many stars. And when Jarrell wants to take a game over, he's unguardable, and I think that's going to happen in this game. I think Duke's going to play for the national championship. North Carolina had a great run. Hubert Davis did an outstanding job getting North Carolina to this point when they were a bubble team after losing to Pitt, to finish the year basically as they're going to finish the year in the top 10, and that's a top 10 team. Um, it's also probably unfortunate for them to play a team as talented as Duke, and they won't be intimidated. But I think Duke's talent is going to just to be a little bit too much for them.
What do you think there, Mr. Scott? I know you've been watching these games.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm actually shocked that Jeffrey is taking Duke. I mean, I think that's just shocking. I mean, I thought that he was going to be almost kind of like when I used to watch, like I say, the old fights against Muhammad Ali when Ken Norton and Joe Frazier were commentating. All of a sudden, they were very biased against Muhammad. Joe would say, "Oh yeah, Ken I like the other guy. I like the other guy." So, but I'm with him on that. I just think the Duke, the panache, what's all on the line, the players they have, I think they're gonna. I just want to see the game. I think that's one that I just really. This is one that I really. This is one that I really want to see, and it's a Ali Frazier type of a thing, and I think. But I like. I just think Duke. This is a swan song, and I think that this probably going to be a happy ending for Krzyzewski. But
What do you think there, Bill?
I mean, I think there's as always, a few different things that could happen. I guess which part am I answering?
I can't hear Bill that good.
What was that?
Mr. Scott says he can't hear you that well. It sounds like it kind of sounds like you're talking through a can.
Hold on.
I think Bill secretly has a prick 10 back there that he's trying to talk to. While Bill's trying to get his volume adjusted there, Jeffrey, what would it mean to Hubert Davis's legacy if he beat Mike Krzyzewski and went to the final?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the middle of the season for North Carolina, I mean, you would watch them play, and at times they looked like a team. I know at no point did you really think they were a Final Four team, but you thought, okay, this is a team that can reach a second weekend of the NCAA tournament, um, one week, and then their next game they'd come back, and you're like, this team's going out, and if they play in the NIT, they won't make it out of the first round. Um, they run Michigan off the floor, who was at the time in the top 10, but they lose to Pitt. They have these series of losses, and they're either blowing out teams or losing, you know, to people they shouldn't lose to, and they're on the bubble like 2 weeks before the ACC tournament and selection Sunday, and then they start kind of turning it on, and that win over Duke, um, when he won at Cameron, that kind of turned the tide of the North Carolina fan base. You know, he's a North Carolina guy,
Yeah.
but where they really accepted him and said, "Hey, this guy can continue the legacy of Dean Smith and Roy Williams, and he can keep it going." He won over the fan base, and now his run to the Final Four. I mean, he's playing with house money right now. I mean, it even if he loses that game, he's won over the fan base because they think, okay, he can take them in, to the rest of this decade. But if he beats Duke, oh my! I don't think he could do it. They'd probably be ready to build a statue of him if he ruins Coach K's final game. And I mean, I think he's really endeared himself to the fans at Chapel Hill. I mean, you saw the way he was at the end of the Elite Eight game over St. Peter's. I mean, he was in tears. And one thing he did that I think was one of the best coaching jobs he did, during the course of the season, is at no time when they were going to face St. Peter's did he look at that as like, we're playing a 15 seed. He looked at that team and said, hey, that team beat two teams that beat us this year. They beat Kentucky and they beat Purdue, and we couldn't beat them. So he had his team like just 100% focused at St. Peter's and respecting them 100%. And so they came out razor sharp, and I think that was an outstanding coaching job that he did to get them ready, for a dangerous St. Peter's team, but one that, athletically North Carolina should have be able to outman. But you know if they come out of that game kind of slow, St. Peter's knocks a couple threes down early, and all of a sudden, you got 5 minutes left in the game, and you're up one or you're down one, and anything could happen. So I think Davis has done a great job. But boy, if he knocks off Duke in that game, I mean, I don't think he can go anywhere in North Carolina except Durham, except Durham, and have his meal paid for.
Bill, you got your volume fixed yet?
I don't know. You tell me.
Mr. Scott, can you hear him any better?
I don't know. What about the rest of you guys? Can you hear him?
It sounds a little muffled to me still.
Okay, so let's take another shot. Right? Hold on. Let's see.
Mr. Scott, what's your thoughts on Hubert Davis and how he's managed to come along and be accepted, as Jeffrey said, by the North Carolina fan base?
Yeah.
It's quite a controversy when he was first hired about whether or not he was the man for the job. I'm sure you remember that too, Jeffrey.
Yeah. I actually, they were talking on ACC Network this morning. They had an interview with the AD of North Carolina, Bubba Cunningham, who said he kind of, he wasn't sure about Hubert Davis because of his inexperience as a head coach. And now, of course, he's happy he made that decision. But yeah, there was some question, when he got hired, about him not of ever being a head coach, and it's worked out for sure.
Yeah, what do you think, Mr. Scott? I'm sure you remember Hubie's playing days.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great turnaround. I mean, this being able to come from a player to coaching, a big time program like that and getting up to the top of the game, I think that's outstanding. I mean, a lot of them have tried. I mean, a lot of good players. I mean, he he was a good player, but I mean, he wasn't the top, top 10 type player. And so it seems like those are some of the guys that really turned into really good coaches. And he's really I mean, that's a tough job there. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on that type of job. And for him to come through like that, I think it's extremely impressive. And like I say, that's one I want to see. That's one that I just want to watch that from beginning to end.
Bill, you gotta get that volume fixed because we need you in there for this one.
So the first
I mean,
place
Hubie wasn't even the best player on his team.
well, no. I mean, Walter, his uncle.
There
I
you
think,
go. There
was a
you
better
go.
player.
Sounds
But
good.
the first time I ever saw a basketball game, right, was in person, was at the old Carmichael Auditorium, and I watched Phil Ford and Mitch Kupchak. I watched, you know, I remember very distinctly. Well, one, the smell, but the Dean Dome doesn't have the smell of the old Carmichael Auditorium. But it was a tremendous environment, and of course, they were our hated rivals then, and they are our hated rivals now. And someone said, something about like people rooting against greatness. No, I root for greatness. I root against Duke. That's don't get confused. And I can respect what Coach Krzyzewski has done. I remember what Bill Foster did before him. I mean, when I was very lucky, and the ACC was ludicrously talented in the coaching positions in the times I really followed ACC basketball. I mean, you could watch Lefty Drizel. You had him. You had Norm Sloan, and then later Valvano at NC State. You had, like I said, Bill Foster, and then eventually Krzyzewski. You had, Dave Odom. You had, just terrific coaching. I mean, everybody. And Bobby Crimmins. I mean, there wasn't a bad coach in the conference, at least when I was first started following ACC basketball. And it was, the emergence later of the Big East sort of shifted a little bit, but there was still great basketball in the ACC. But now there was like an actual contender for, the best conference in basketball. And obviously, even when UCLA was winning all the time, the Pac was Pac-8 and then later the Pac-10, but they weren't thought of as the conference. They just had the team. The conference as a whole was, Washington State would have a nice run every now and again and things like that. But it was UCLA, head and shoulders above everybody else. In the ACC, even when Carolina was at its best, they might get knocked off by Maryland or NC State, Duke, or whatever. They were all good. We saw an 18-10 in the regular season, at least NC State team won it all under Valvano. So it was some of the best basketball I've ever seen in terms of just level of competition, great teams meeting week after week after week. And then, like I said, the Big East pops off, and God, college basketball was so good in the early 80s. It was so good. And I still watch now, but it's just not the same. You don't get a chance to really learn players. The good players all go after a year or two. But getting back to this rivalry, of course, I remember Hubert Davis quite clearly as a player, 6'4", 182, right? I remember a lot of things about Hubert Davis and, his high school accolades and seeing him develop as a player in his professional career and then getting into coaching and things like that and seeing, what he's already done. And as Jeffrey just said, I mean, obviously there are other parts of the state. Like, I don't think Winston-Salem would love him, and I don't think he's going to get, all that much love in some other parts of the state. But in that area right there, like, obviously not on the Durham side, but in Carrboro, in Chapel Hill, right around there, yeah, he'll never have to worry about, paying to have his car washed, his lawn mowed. If he goes over to, I don't know if Ice Cream Creations is still there, but that was my favorite place when I was a kid, over there on Franklin Avenue. In that area, yeah, like he'll never have to pay for anything on Franklin Avenue, for the rest of his life if they win it all. Oh my God, first year.
Might as well just retire.
Well, he could, but there'll be calls for him to basically make coach for life at that point.
Yeah.
Back, I mean, what people have to understand, and Carolina has a very good football program, and has at times had great players come out of their football program, but they live and die. I can speak as having lived there for 3 years of my life. They live and die with that basketball program. And that year when they won it in both, like women's and men's, oh my God, you couldn't tell the Tar Heels anything, because I don't think anybody had ever done that before, won it on both the men's and the women's side the same year. And when they did that, like I said, you couldn't tell them anything. Like you couldn't tell them anything at all. Yeah, that arrogance kicked up yet another notch. And so, if in this culminating event, where in the final game of Coach Krzyzewski's illustrious career, where, I mean, some people call him the GOAT, I still can't give that to him because I'm old enough to remember what Coach Wooden did. I mean, that no one's going to do that again. That's never going to be done again. Somebody might win as many games as Krzyzewski. Somebody might win more championships than Krzyzewski. But nobody's going to win as many championships as Con Wooden won. Like, that ship has sailed. That will never happen again. But he's in the top. He's on the Mount Rushmore of college coaches. I will say that much of Coach Krzyzewski.
Yeah.
I think Dean Smith's on that Mount Rushmore too. But yes, it's an amazing program. I am in love with this Final Four. I mean, it feels like something that would happen in a movie, right? This doesn't feel all that realistic, frankly, but I love that it's happened this way, where this Carolina team that is pointed out, right, was up and down and, looked like they didn't know how to play defense sometimes, and shot selection would be horrific sometimes. And to have their guard play when they needed it to suddenly emerge, like, oh, where was this all the time? And see Maddox, who has had good weeks before, but play like a dominant player at times, where he was, that's not really what he really is, but don't tell him that. So as long as he can convince himself he's a dominant player, he keeps playing like one, I guess I can't get mad at him. But yeah, I'd love to see them knock Duke off. But if Duke wins it all, I'll live. But it's a great Final Four. And if you're a basketball fan, even if you're not really a college basketball, if you're a basketball fan, you need to watch this.
Yep. Jeffrey, well, let's see. We do have another side there, Kansas Villanova. Who do you think that the Tar Heels or Duke will be facing?
Yeah, I mean that if that's the undercard of North Carolina Duke, I mean, you've got something, because that's a couple blue bloods there, Kansas and Bill Self and Villanova and Jay Wright. The only thing that takes away from that game at all was Justin Moore getting hurt for Villanova. I mean, if he wouldn't have gotten hurt, I mean, Villanova could very well be the national champion, and I mean, they might be, but I just can't see them, knocking off Kansas, which I think they can do in a one game scenario. I think Jay Wright is that good. But I mean, if you go basically Kansas, the end Duke, or Kansas and a red hot North Carolina team, I just can't see Villanova being able to do that. In that game, though, I do favor Kansas, one, because of the more injury, and because two, you saw what I mean. Kansas, they got a pretty talented team themselves. Maybe not quite as talented as some of the past Kansas team, but I mean, they got a senior guard with Agabi. He's an All-American, and that second half against Miami, they did something that no one had been able to even come close to doing against Miami during the tournament. Is they did what Miami had been doing and just dictating the tempo and the flow of the game, and they switched. They just switched on, and that's early in that second half, and did not look back. And I said, "Whoa, that's a team, that Kansas team that did that to Miami, who had been had played great during the tournament." I was like, that team can win the national championship. And so that's one of the things with the North Carolina Duke game. is the winner of that game can't look at it like, all right, we got past our arch rival, national championship, because I think they're going to be going up against a Kansas team that is very capable
Yes.
of beating either one of them. And I think it's probably a little bit better matchup for Duke because of their talent level. But I think you're going to see the winner of the Duke North Carolina game play Kansas, and that's going to be like the blue bloods of the blue bloods playing for a national championship there.
Yes.
You see it playing, Mr. Scott? Kansas against Duke.
I guess I have to agree with Jeff. I mean, undercard, semi windup. I they're going to be great games. I can't make a. I just think they're pick'ems, and I think it's going to come down to the winner of that North Carolina Duke game. That's where my money's at. I don't know if there's. What about you, James? I mean, should we do anything on this, James? I mean, my record on you is unblemished at this time. So, I think,
Oh my goodness. Bill, what's your thoughts here? Kansas Duke?
Oh, I thought you were going to say my thoughts, James, is that you may need to mute him. That's the person whose mic you need to do some work on.
Hey, 1-0. What can I say? But is it?
Yeah. So to the analysis, Kansas should win, but Villanova scares me, man. Something about that. And then when Moore went down, I was like, yeah, but that makes me feel almost like when people are going to dismiss them, like, oof.
That want to dismiss them.
Yeah, like that feels like a mistake. Like, don't start handing, Kansas that berth in the championship game. Villanova is just they're so well. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but they're so well coached. They're so mentally strong as a team. Kansas should win, but I will be not even a tiny bit surprised if Villanova finds a way to do it. Villanova scares me, man. I'm just not confident of anybody his ability to eliminate Villanova. They're just everything about the way they play basketball tells me they're going to have a chance to be in this game all the way to the end. So, gun to my head, I would say Kansas, but I'm still not 100%. I mean, not even. I'm not 51% confident that like it's like 50.001. Like it's just over 50% because I mean Villanova's tough and scrappy and they play good defense and they make good decisions and they create good shots for themselves. Even the guys who aren't great shooters, they find a way to get those guys shots they can make and.
Well, who's your national champion then?
I mean, this is where my heart takes over, and I say Carolina. They shouldn't win it, but they're the least in terms of consistent. They're the least consistent of the teams left. I mean, all the other teams that are left are more consistently good than Carolina, and they're not even the most talented. They're very talented, but not the most talented squad. But yeah, my heart has just, completely taken over my head. If you're asking my head,
you can only pick one now.
I mean, the one I picked was Carolina. It's just a heart thing.
Okay. Mr. Scott, who's your national champion? Who's cutting down the net?
I'm Duke. I just I don't know if it's sentimental. I don't know if it's swan song type of a thing. And the thing about Krzyzewski, no, he just hasn't had any controversy. I mean, he just has gone on and he's just continued to recruit well, continue to get the best players, and then a lot of his players leave after 1 year, and he still continues to build a good program. So I'm going with Duke.
Well, Jeffrey, do you want to break the tie? I got one North Carolina, one Duke here.
I mean, none of the four, like we've been talking, would shock me. Because I probably put Villanova fourth on this list and Duke one, but I mean, none of them would shock me because they got three Hall of Fame coaches, they got NBA stars everywhere. Hubert Davis has been great, but I have to go with Duke because of a couple things. One, the talent level. They're the most talented team in the Final Four. Uh, Two, I don't think that this is the last game type thing. Krzyzewski really enters their mind anymore. I don't remember which Duke player said it, but he said that we've been playing an entire season. If this is the last, X, Y, or Z for Mike Krzyzewski, and I think getting to the Final Four, each one of those games could have been Mike Krzyzewski's last game, and they came through against Michigan State and Texas Tech, um, late in those games. So I think they can just go out there and play basketball. I think they proved against Texas Tech and Arkansas, two of the better defensive teams in the country, and I mean they're so talented. I think it shot over 70% in the second half against Texas Tech, and then over 50% against Arkansas. And those teams were helpless. And I mean, you're not going to have two better defensive teams, and none of the four, none of the other three can play defense as well as those two teams. I mean, their other teams are better offensively, but you just have this impossible task of trying to slow that team down. The only way they're going to lose is one of those other teams is going to basically have to do what North Carolina did in Durham and score something in the high 80s or 90, because you're not going to be able to stop them. And so I think that's what is going to make them so difficult to beat is you're going to have to keep up with them. And I don't think the other teams, you're going to have to keep up with them. I think good defense might be able to slow the other three teams down, but I don't think there's any defense you can throw out there that's going to be able to slow this Duke team down. They can be beat, but you're going to have to play an unbelievable offensive game to stay with them. And so that's why I like Duke. I think Duke's going to take down the Nets. It's unbelievable that Mike Krzyzewski might end his career with a national championship, number 6.
I think the over under for that game is 142, something like that. It's supposed to be a really high scoring game.
Yeah.
But Jeffrey, as always, well, just before you go, a lot of people have watched that McDonald's game, and they're talking about McDonald's All Americans. Who are we going to see in the ACC next year?
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of the game, and two of them that stood out, and of course this is where I think with John Shire, Duke is just going to keep going at least uh, through next year. The two best players in that game that most people are saying were Dariq Whitehead and Derek Lively, and they're both going to Duke. So um, those are two that you're gonna see in the ACC next year, and that they're going to have Duke in the top 5 or 6 for the entire course of the year. So they were arguably the two best players in the game, and they're both headed to Duke, and Duke's just they're just going to keep going.
All right, Jeffrey. Well, hey, thanks as always, man. Give us your final thoughts for the evening, and we hope to talk to you next week when North Carolina cuts down those strings, right, Bill?
Yeah, it could happen. Yeah, you can find me at Talking ACC Sports on Twitter. I'll definitely be talking about these games. It's been a little while over the past couple years that we hadn't had a ACC team, in one of the championship games, but we got it. We got it this time, so I'm looking forward to that. Louisville, the ladies, they're in the Final Four, like we talked about. So I mean, I'm just looking forward to a great Final Four. Even the Kansas Villanova game is going to be outstanding,
Yep.
and I think it's going to set up a great. I mean, this is one of the Final Fours. When you look across the board, this is going to be huge, and the ratings for the NCAA tournament have been monstrous. I mean,
Yep.
several of the games have outdrawn, some of the the bigger college football games of the season. So we might be kind of looking this as, I know Bill was talking about the 80s and the Big East. And we might be looking at a little bit of a resurgence for college basketball. I'm all for that. So looking forward to that. And you can find us blogging at allsportsdiscussion.com. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. It should be really good. As always,
All right.
enjoy it, guys, being on the show.
Appreciate you, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. You have a great
All right.
one.
You all take care.
Thank you, sir.
Boy, talk about excitement. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch this Milwaukee versus Philadelphia.
Man, I was just watching that came right to the last shot.
Now, see, people were talking about, the other game where Giannis blocked Embiid's shot, and they were talking, oh, yeah, won't it? Well, Giannis, tonight took him into an overtime and then came away with the win, 120 to 119. So we got Mike in here, so I'm going to kind of skip through this. But Mike, who do you got winning the Final Four? We just got finished talking a little March Madness there.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't like North Carolina. I don't like Duke. I don't like Kansas, personally. So I'm left with Villanova. So I'm going to go Villanova.
And Villanova's main player just got hurt, right?
That's right. I forgot about that. He got injured in that last game. I'll still go Villanova.
So you're taking the dark horse.
Definitely dark horse because, wow, yeah, I forgot about that injury. That's too bad. But, I mean, I don't think – who's playing North Carolina? Is it Kansas? Duke? Yeah, I think Duke wins that game. And then
Kansas is playing Villanova.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one without their big guy. So it's probably going to be Duke and Kansas, I would imagine.
And the winner is?
Winner is Duke. I think they go out on top with Mike Krzyzewski and, celebrate and all that. Tears coming down. And, I think this is definitely written for glory here.
All right, guys. Well, Mike, as always, we're right on time here. Mr. Scott, he has to make sure we have to make sure we get him, out at a proper time. We have to take care of our senior citizens here and make sure that they get home safe and whatnot. But
as I've always said, the bottle may be old, but the wine is still good. So,
there you go. Absolutely. Yep.
Spoken from as Don would say, from his palatial estate there in Minneapolis. So let's talk a little football here. And Mike, wow. Even though let's go by order here because there are a lot of things to talk about. And the first thing, let's talk about this new, improved, revised, whatever you want to call it, Rooney Rule.
Yeah.
Where now every team has to have a minority offensive coach, but the minority can also be a woman.
Correct.
So, Mike, I'm going to get your thoughts on this first.
I think it's great. Do I think it's going to work? Do I think they're going to ignore it just like they've been all this time with the Rooney Rule? And I totally agree. I think it's great on paper. We'll see how it actually plays out throughout the years. So right now, kudos, but we all know that it's more. I think it's more about NFL saying, "Hey, we're doing the right thing here," but don't look what we swept under the rug because you'll find that we don't really care about this because we really never have.
What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Scott? All 32 teams now must have a minority offensive coach, but you know that minority can now be a woman.
Well, if they can find a woman that can do it, that's great. I don't have a woman that's played football or has coached or has been a coordinator or has
Bruce Arians' staff had 2 women coaches on it when they won the Super Bowl.
Has been but to me, the NFL is a fraud anyway. I mean, when you look at, they keep saying, okay, I've heard what Mike thinks about Deshaun Watson, and I know a lot of people feel that way. But then when I have to flip that script, because what do I think about Bill Belichick? I say greatest coach in history, so he cheated. He filmed people. Yep. That's against the ultimate rule. Then Deflategate, and then he made Brady take the fall, and Brady said, "I didn't do anything. Why do I don't know nothing about the balls. I just play quarterback." He said, "I don't know anything about it." And then the owner did what they say Watson did, and the owner's on film. He's on film doing it, and it went away. So, I mean, the credibility of the NFL to me is, it's cosmetics. They make a lot of money. They want to keep making a lot of money. It's the most popular sport. But, when you look at those type of things, Bill Belichick's the greatest coach. I mean, what about Don Shula? What about Vince Lombardi? What about? I mean, my thoughts.
You can throw Big Ben in there.
Big Ben too. Absolutely.
You can throw Big Ben in there. I'm all right with it. It's okay.
And not only once, but twice. He did it twice.
Yeah.
Bill, what's your thoughts? On this. I think to me it's inclusion by exclusion. But what's your thoughts?
Well, I think I proposed on a show in the past what I would do to reward teams that promoted. So what I said before is I wasn't going to make a rule about you have to have a certain number or anything like that. I said that every team that internally promoted a minority coach would gain a compensatory draft pick. And then if you promoted that same person twice, you would get 2 compensatory draft picks. I truly believe that the thing that's going to change this problem is when there is an overwhelmingly several successful Black head coaches, a couple of successful, Latino or Asian Pacific Islander head coaches, and eventually we will have, I believe, someday a woman head coach. We saw already, like I said, when Bruce Arians put his staff together that won a Super Bowl, he had not 1 but 2 women and two black coordinators. The most diverse staff in history won a Super Bowl with 2 women and 2 black coordinators. Nobody in the history of the game could say that. They had 2 women on the staff and 2 black coordinators. So, you've got Jennifer King now in Washington, and she's done great work. She helped to develop Antonio Gibson, right? She's one of the best running back coaches in the league. Nobody wants to talk about it, but she's a great running backs coach. You have one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the league with Tampa Bay. Who's been helping Tom to quote unquote beat Father Time, right? She has. So there is a number of really terrific young, some of them are young, not all of them are young, but most of them are fairly young, dynamic, intelligent, terrific, young, women coaches in the league. And many of them are also women of color. So I think it's a great thing that we're finally putting something into this to make it happen. I still kind of prefer my solution because I think it's more carrot, less stick, but whatever it takes to get it done. I don't care how they get it done. And yes, is there a cosmetic, a PR angle, whatever? Of course there is. Like everything, like the quote unquote salute to service or, the pink ribbons. And I mean, it's all obviously the league is concerned primarily about the bottom line, but they'll throw a bone at something that is cosmetic every now and again. But I think
Speaking of throwing bones, the NFL also is seeking to reduce head contact by the mandate of the use of the Guardian cap helmet.
Yep.
For the early portion of training camp.
Yep.
Bill, why not for the whole season?
Well,
I mean,
you've
got a quarterback with the red shirt. You got wide receivers. I mean, much less contact than when we played. But
obviously. So, and this is first of all, one would say, why did it take this long? But the reason you won't see it in a regular season, you just mentioned it, cosmetics. It doesn't look great. I mean, I remember Mark Kelso in college, obviously, and then later in the league. Having grown up in the part of Virginia where I did, I got to see him play at William and Mary. My mother, that's where she got her law degree. So we would go to William and Mary games, a couple, per year. And I remember Mark Kelso as a player there. And then later he gets, to the Bills. And because he'd had a number of concussions in college, by the time he gets to the NFL, and I think he had at least one or two more, they had him wear a specially modified helmet with additional padding in it. And it didn't seem to hamper his play.
Nope.
I'm not sure why more players, frankly, even this is 30 plus years ago, so this isn't a new thing.
No.
So I always wonder why more players, particularly those that had shown to be particularly susceptible to concussions, weren't already wearing modified helmets. I think people used to joke him, call him the Great Gazoo and stuff like that. And he laughed it off, right? And had a nice little NFL career as opposed to not being able to play in the league anymore because of the number of concussions. Anything that reduces the number of concussions, I'm all for. So sign me up.
What do you think there, Mr. Scott? Not football as we grew up with, football practice, but what do you think about these new mandates for the health of the players?
The safety. Well, I mean, I think it's again the NFL to me. I mean, I watch these guys. They have no hip pads. They have no knee pads. They have nothing on. They just come out there with just basic pants and tennis shoes on and track shoes and run. And you figure you're not going to get hurt by getting tackled. You're not going to get hurt with the contact and the speed of this game now. Yeah. I mean, they really, when you look at from the waist down, they don't have anything on their hip pads. They don't have nothing. And so how can you expect to not get hurt? You can get a turf injury just by hitting the turf on some of these things. So, of course, the head injuries are serious. I mean, they know that there's lawsuits. There's, the CTE, and this thing is documented. But I mean, I think I just don't understand how they can play. And sometimes they look like they don't even have on any shoulder pads. I mean, very little bit of nothing on. No arm pads, no nothing.
Well, you have no contact. You have no contact practice now, Mr. Scott. It's not like when we played football when you had to come with like you said, everything. Your shoulder pads, your half the pad, the shoulder pads weigh half of what they used to. The helmet certainly weighs much less than it used to, and you have a lot more protection with a lot less visible equipment. Mike, what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, look at the pads that Herschel Walker used to wear. Herschel Walker had shoulder pads that were, up here.
Right. Ronnie Lott, anybody from a certain era.
Yeah. And well, we won't talk about how many Herschel Walker and his problems, but go ahead, yeah. Mike. What do you think about this new mandate for the Guardian cap?
I think it's a lot like what Mr. Scott said. I think it's a lawsuit. They're worried. They don't want to get sued. And so the main thing to try to avoid being sued about is the CTE and everything else. So the more they can protect that, the more they can protect their bottom line. Now, if it was kneecaps that were a problem, then they would be wearing knee guards and stuff like that. But no one's really talking about that. That's not a really big, problem for the NFL. They're not getting sued over kneecaps. They're getting sued over concussions and CTE. So protection of bottom line.
Yeah. Well, also, are you like? Can you block below the waist anymore? I'm not even sure that.
You
Is that
can within that was it 3 yard or whatever box, but
Right.
only when the player's facing you. You can't block anyone from behind anymore.
You can't have it two, like what the 49ers used to do, engage with one offense or defensive lineman and then have another one cut below the waist. You can't do that either. So and one-on-one, you can drop your body down and make contact.
Correct.
But if that player's engaged, then not another player can do so.
Okay. So now you have to have an interpreter come and tell you where you can block. There's no you block this hole and you catch the guy that's coming in the blitz. I guess all that's anyway.
Yep.
I digress. Mike, the NFL owners have decided that they're going to approve new overtime rules, which we had talked about before,
Right.
but only for the postseason. Marcus Spears says that this ruling was about feelings and emotions and not about football. Do you agree or disagree?
I do agree. I think this. Okay, so I have two problems with this situation. Number one, it's not being addressed throughout the regular season. If you're going to have a rule, then have the rule go start from week 1 when games count to the end of the season. That's including postseason. To all of a sudden put a shift in the postseason and change things, and where players are not used to this whole situation and you got to adjust and coaches have to adjust and those kind of things. Absolutely. I do also agree with the feelings, because where did all this talk come from? It was all emotions about the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes duel. And we didn't want it to end because it was so much fun. Well, fun is feelings, and that isn't based on fact and situation. So, yeah, I do agree. I think it's based on emotions, and I do think that they had to come away with some kind of an answer, but I don't agree with this answer to the problem.
What do you think, Mr. Scott? Both teams now have to have possession, or at least one possession, but it's only in the postseason. Is this feelings or football?
I think it should just be all the way around. I mean, again, and I have to say, football in general. I mean, my dad took me to an exhibition game once, and I said, it was nothing to nothing at the halftime. I said, God, we're losing. Towards the end of the half, I said, we're losing. He said, no, we're not, because we're moving down the field. We're getting close so Fred Cox can kick a field goal. And now, 3rd and 15, 4th down in your own territory, they go for it. The kickers, 50 yards, 60 yards, I wonder, didn't they move the goalposts back? And they even look smaller to me. For some reason, it looks like they've been.
They are smaller. They are much smaller than they used to be when we were in high school.
So I think
they don't cover the whole half of the field like they used to, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, and I don't like I think both teams should have a chance in overtime. I like that. I think that the first team doesn't score and the next team scores, it should be over. At some point you get beat. I don't know. You can't keep, and I think it should be during the regular season, not just in the playoffs. I think it should be in the regular season. But just an opinion. And again, the great coach Denny Green said the great thing about America is everybody can have an opinion. But what's even greater is you don't have to listen to it. So, that's my opinion.
What do you think there, Bill? about the. I was glad. I was fine with the rule as it was. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I was
good.
fine with.
I've played under all my career. I mean,
Yeah.
Sure, I was fine with sudden death, flip a coin. If you score, game's over. I was fine with that. I was fine with the little nibbling iterations, that they've been using since then. I was fine with those, and I'll be fine with this. I'm not a person who gets too worked up over things, too high, too low, whatever. But yeah, I think it's a solid change. It'll satisfy most, if not all, of those who've been demanding something more out of, really out of the league, period, but especially out of the postseason. Hopefully.
well, Mr. Scott, it looks like the Vikings have landed an offensive linebacker. I mean, excuse me, an outside linebacker when they added Smith with 42 million. I think it was 24 guaranteed, something like that. Then you also got uh, Jadarius Smith. I don't know. Looks like you did a lot of poaching from the Vikings there. And then you re-signed Peterson. Mr. Scott, what's happening up there with the Vikings? Except for the re-sign of that guy that plays quarterback, you guys might have a little team there.
Oh, he's on mute.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah.
The move.
We heard you there for a minute. Go ahead, Miss.
Are you
Can we
back?
hear you
Am
now?
I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Oh, yeah, I have to go with Bill Carroll on this general manager. He's making moves. I mean, this Peterson move, is this a retirement move so he can retire with the Vikings, or is he actually going to play? I mean, I think that's going to be very interesting. And also, it looks like the new coach has really made a real connection with Cousins. I mean, it looks like they've really sat down and said, we're going to plan this thing out and give this thing our best shot. I think they see an opening. I think the Packers now are weakened. They lost their best receiver. They, when I'm not worried about the Bears, and where's my Detroit gentleman? I guess I can say whatever I want about Detroit tonight. He's not here. But Detroit, those are 2 wins, given wins. They've been for years. So, I'm curious about the Peterson thing, though. I mean, we already have 2 good backs. We have Cook, we have Matson, we have 2 very good backs. I'm a little bit pumped about the Vikings. I think there's a shot. I love the new coaching, and I've not been a big fan of computerized and all this. What do they call it?
Analytics.
Analytics. Oh, this whole, I mean, I'm the old where Tony Oliva said, "See the ball, hit the ball," and I think that's so the analytics and the numbers. We'll see. But so far, it's looking good. So far, it's looking real good, especially in this division.
Staying in that division, there, reports say that the Packers couldn't keep Devontae Adams because of the guaranteed money that he wanted. And the reason why they couldn't give him that guaranteed money is because of the big contract they gave to Rodgers. Bill, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we're now moving into a quarterback economy and ecology where top quarterbacks will get paid like top pitchers in baseball, and like top pitchers in baseball will actually have guaranteed contracts. I don't think it's going to get quite to that level with other great players. I think at running back and receiver, the deals will be shorter. There'll be less guaranteed money. You'll probably get 1 or 2 years where the money's mostly guaranteed, and then it'll go down every year until probably your last season there, where it'll be close to 0% guaranteed, just because of the nature of the beast in terms of some positions. But I'm not surprised to see it, and we see now that more and more quarterbacks see themselves as essentially junior middle management and just employees. So does it always work out? I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire apparently was drafted by the Chiefs on the behest of Patrick LaVon Mahomes Jr. So you might want to take certain things into account. You just have people who haven't been doing months and months of work wander into your draft room, but whatever. But yes, it's going to become the norm for the elite quarterbacks in the league. Not for, every guy, but for the, top 8, I think it'll be fairly common soon.
But Mike, did Rodgers' deal cost the Packers a Super Bowl contention?
Yeah, without Devontae Adams, absolutely, unless they have some kind of plan. But even if they have a plan, where's that coming from? Is that coming from the draft, and you're hoping a star wide receiver emerges? The chances are that's not going to happen. So, I mean, they don't have anybody to throw the ball to. So he's making all the money, but he's going to look like a fool in the end because, he's going to trust Randall Cobb. He's going to trust, Scantling's gone, but Tanyan and just a bunch of scrubs. Ellen Lazard's okay, but overall it's a mess. And so either going to run the ball 80% of the time, which doesn't work, or you're going to throw it 60% of the time or 55% of the time to nobody. So I don't see how this team is a playoff team unless they do something to get a valid receiver.
Mr. Scott, did losing Devontae Adams put the Vikings in contention in that division?
Oh, sure it does. But see, receivers are diva-ish. All this old diva-ish stuff. That's why Kansas City gets rid of Hill. That's why the Vikings get rid of Diggs, and then they get Jefferson. Go down there. I think Bill was saying the last show. I mean, there's a lot of speed. There's a lot of guys that are just waiting to get in this NFL. They're just wait. You go. Alabama had 3 number 1 draft choices, I think, receivers. Go down there and get you one. I mean, so I would think Green Bay, but I definitely agree with Mike. They need to replace a Devontae Adams. I mean, and can they get lucky and find a Jefferson like we did? That's just rolling the dice right there. I mean, I don't know if you're going to find that right away. And so that's why I like the Vikings with Thielen, with Jefferson, with Delvin Cook, Madison backing him up just in case, and picking up the defenders they picked up, the linebacker they just picked up, and then Cousins. I mean, look at his stats for the last few years. I mean, 35, 40 touchdowns, 6, 7 interceptions. I mean, he doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, he's not really mobile or running, but you got Cook, you got Madison to do that. So if they can really shore up their line, and really that's been the big problem with them, that offensive line. They just haven't been able to really get a real good offensive line going. And I haven't been all in on the Vikings because I always say something always happens. Something always happens with them. It's just, but I think this year could be. I think this. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Matter of fact, I've got a couple of tickets, in line to go see some of the games. It's right down the street from me, and I think this could be, especially in this division. I really think they can make some noise. I really do.
You might want to check your schedule because I think this team that I represent back here is on your schedule. I think we play you this year.
Where is it? Do you know?
It should be. I think it's an away game. I think we play you in Minnesota. I believe. You can check.
Oh, it's a home game then. Yeah. Well, that's
a home game. It's home game for you, I believe. I believe we play you this year.
That should be a win. With who's your new quarterback? Is the guy from Chicago, right?
Trubisky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Boy, I should circle that one because I
Yes,
think
yes, you should because
I should
yeah,
circle that one.
yeah, you
Yeah.
should circle that one. Make sure you do. You know, we'll see if your record remains unbeaten. But anyway,
No,
uh,
not unbeaten, unblemished, unblemished.
uh, uh, unblemished. Oh, okay, all right. That, but okay, let's see. Mike McCarthy. He's not. He didn't attend the NFL League Managers meeting this week, but he went and scouted, a few teams for Jerry. Make sure that the draft went all right. Is that a bad sign for his future in Dallas, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know really what to tell that without knowing the full story. So it all depends, but you don't. I mean, you're going to this meeting where everybody else is going to, is coaches and stuff, and you're not there. It's pretty, I guess, ominous, but you're just still like, okay, maybe there was a reason for it. And if there wasn't a reason for it, then you can definitely think, okay, what's behind the scenes here? So ominous, yes. Is there anything going to come out of it? Or if he was just sick or had to take care of something, then, we'll see. But yeah, it's definitely doesn't look appropriate.
What's your thoughts on Mike McCarthy not getting to the meeting, Bill? Bill? Do we have Bill?
Uh-oh. Bill. Bill might have fallen asleep.
I think we lost Bill. Mr. Scott, what do you think about Mike McCarthy, Jerry not sending him to the managers meeting? What do you think? You think he's going to be? Do you think that he's going to be the coach of the Cowboys all season, or do you think we're going to see Dan Quinn?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I think Jerry Jones is a little bit like a Steinbrenner, where anything can happen. Maybe he'll put on the headset. I mean, anything's possible. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Dallas. I mean, I thought they should be a playoff team. I mean, they got talent. I mean, up to yin yang, but they just don't seem to really get off the dime. I like Dak. I mean, my buddies down in Texas, boy, they can't stand him. They just can't stand him. But I don't really know what to make of them. They should be able to make noise in that division. Why they don't? The money's there. Everything's there.
Well, we'll just have to see. Dallas, the best team in the worst division in football. What can you say? So, you know, but we will talk about them a little down the line here a little bit. The Seahawks. The Seahawks say that they intend to sign DK Metcalf. But when you look at the wide receiver market and the money that they're throwing out there for these wide receivers, plus it's looking like Drew Lock is going to be his quarterback.
Yeah.
Do you think that DK is going to be in a Seahawk uniform when the season begins? Mr. Scott, what do you think?
Well, if he doesn't have a quarterback, like I say, these receivers are kind of diva-ish. I mean, if they don't have anybody that's going to get them the ball, that's a problem. I mean, that's a problem right off the bat. They want to get paid, and I don't know what they have for a quarterback now. So I think that's a problem. I mean, I think you can't have good wide receiver without good quarterbacks. So where it goes from there with Seattle, and I don't know. I don't know about Carroll. He almost seems like he's past his use by date to me, and he's kind of on on fumes right now, leaking oil. So I don't know when they get rid of Wilson. It just says you're starting over to me. Says you're kind of starting over.
What's your thoughts there, Mike? Is DK going to be in a Seahawk uniform?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mr. Scott here because it definitely looks like it's a turnover situation, especially losing Russell Wilson. But it's like when we started this whole thing, when we talked about Seattle, we always talked about like Pete Carroll being the one that it was going to be the guy out. At least I thought so. And it doesn't appear that way. So I'm a little surprised by that as well. I do think that the one thing you never want to be as far as a party, and I'm considering being paid as a party, is late. And right now, DK Metcalf is late, so he could have very well have kind of without getting that money lessened his chances and might have to wait till next year or what. But if with Drew Lock as a quarterback, as you mentioned earlier, then you're not going to be the top guy. I mean, you're good, but you're not going to be scoring 10 touchdowns and catching 80 passes and being the superstar that you've been since a rookie. So this could actually hurt him long term as well.
Yeah, and can Locke throw the ball that far?
Yeah, I don't know.
Nobody knows.
I mean, here's another guy. When you speak of speed, who did he challenge? Did he challenge Hill? I think he challenged Hill. He either challenged Hill or Usain Bolt, one of them, or he wanted to run in the Olympics or something like that. But yeah, he's another one of those speed kill type of guys.
Oh yeah.
So he has to get his and get his early.
Mm-hmm.
The 49ers said that Trey will start sooner or later.
Well,
I mean, you drafted him number 1, right? So I mean, you would think that he would start sooner or later. But are NFL teams afraid of Jimmy G's shoulder surgery, Mike?
I would think so. I think this has a lot to do with it. I was talking with some of my medical guys that are working the NFL field, and they are all saying the same thing. They're saying that this isn't something simple, and it very well could be the fact that why he hasn't been on a team, because he's good enough to start almost anywhere. I mean, of course you have the great ones, but he as a bridge quarterback, I mean, you in Atlanta, right? You who wouldn't want Jimmy G? You're not gonna want what they have there. Or I'm sure I don't know, James, how you feel about Jimmy G, but who would you want, Jimmy Garoppolo or Mitchell Trubisky?
I would, for a season, I would definitely take Jimmy G.
Okay, so and so why aren't these teams doing that? Well, I think it has a lot to do with his shoulder.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mr. Scott? I mean, that is even with today's medicine, there's talk about 6 to 8 weeks before he can even throw a football or make a motion, to go into a throwing motion. Do you think that a lot of teams are thinking, about the surgery, and perhaps they can get him cheaper after the surgery? But the thing of it is this, though, when you look at it, if they cut Jimmy G, they can get relief against the salary cap. If they keep him, they have to pay him. So what's your thoughts on that, Mr. Scott?
That's interesting. I mean, if he's not able to play, then yeah. But I mean, I think he's definitely serviceable. I mean, I think Belichick is upset that he got rid of him, because he was really the guy that should have that he wanted to step in after Brady. And so somehow what happened? He got rid of him, and I mean, he got San Francisco up into the playoffs. I mean, he's one of these guys that, to me, he's competent if he's healthy. That's the thing right there. He's competent. He's not no big, but he is competent to run an offense if he's healthy. If you got everything around him like San Francisco does, I think he'd be good. And I think that Trey, Carson Wentz, these guys from North Dakota are fool's gold. I think they're both fool's gold. I mean, though the skill people from there. Now they got some very good players in that league. They got some very good players there. But their skill players, I think they're fool's gold because it's a different league. It's a different caliber of people. They don't play Alabama. They don't play Ohio State. Right. They don't play those type of teams. So it's, so I wouldn't touch them for skill position players. So I don't think Trey, maybe they'll play him. I mean, maybe they'll be forced to. If Garoppolo's not healthy, or if that's kind of a mystery right now what that's all about. But I just think the North Dakota skill people, I wouldn't touch them.
Mr. Scott, speaking of some things that were kind of unexpected, Tom, we talked about Tom coming back last week, and how that was going to play with Bruce, and the problems. Maybe they had problems last year. Well, guess what? Bruce is no longer the head coach. Bruce has been kicked upstairs. He's now a part of the front office. But a very interesting thing happened on the way to the top. Todd Bowles gets promoted to head coach, which also makes us have another minority head coach. But what's your thoughts here on, he signed a 5-year deal, but do you think it's a coincidence that Tom comes back and Bruce moved up to the front office, Mr. Scott?
I don't know really what to think about their situation. I mean, in the whole, football is about winning, man. I mean, they don't really. If you're a good coach, if you can manage this team, I mean, so far Bowles seems to have a very good track record, and it seems like he's earned the right to get a chance to be a head coach. But we got to see what he can do. I mean, they made Ted Williams a manager. I mean, one of the best hitters, you'll ever see in baseball. And he was a disaster as a manager. So, I think Bowles should be good. I mean, I think they should have a seamless type of thing. But again, Brady is, if not past his use-by date, he's very close to it, regardless of what he says and what he thinks. He's not. He doesn't wear a cape, so we'll see. I think Bowles, though, he's deserved it, and don't know. I mean, Brady's one of those kind of transitional guys. He's kind of like a take my talents type guy. He can kind of call the shots on the teams that he's on because of who he is, what he's done.
So, Mike, you don't think that Bowles is a hand-picked guy?
By who? Tom Brady?
Well, it's certainly not by Bruce.
I think Tom Brady knew from the very beginning, before he came back, that Bruce Arians was going to move up. Because this had to be some talk in all of this, because there wouldn't be a switch like this if Tom Brady didn't know about it before unretiring. So
yeah.
It's one of those things. I'm glad that Todd Bowles is getting a second chance. He had a good season in New York and had 2 bad ones, but that is New York. That's not, a team that's always good. So it's good to see him get another shot on a team that's really good, and we'll see what he can do, and hopefully he can do well, and show that black head coaches can do this job. And I think a lot of people who are black head coaches have a lot of pressure on them to do well, because if they don't, then it's going to be one of those things where the NFL will be like resting their case and saying, well, we told you so. And I don't want that. I don't think anybody wants that. So I do hope that he is the right man for the job.
Bill, Todd Bowles, the chosen one or the scapegoat if the season doesn't go right?
Well, I mean, potentially both, but I remember Todd Bowles playing for Bruce Arians. When Arians was the head coach at Temple, Bowles was probably the best player on one of those teams. Terrific safety, and of course, a terrific player in the NFL, or a very good player in the NFL who transitioned into coaching and has been very successful. So I think, one, as you said, in the whole quest for diversity, a team that's done a really good job at it gets a chance to sort of flex, right? Because as of this minute, of course, things can change, but they have still 2 black coordinators, black head coach, and like I said, a couple women coaches. So if that team continues to succeed, I think we'll see other teams come around on it as well.
But see, to me, the question in those things is not whether a black person or a black coach can coach. I mean, that's not it. I mean, it just depends on your team, what talent you have. Exactly. I mean, it really does. I mean, look at Dusty Baker, for example. Dusty Baker is in his 70s, and they have to call him out of retirement to come to a top team that's already a top team. And he's doing it everywhere he's been successful as a manager. So that as to who can and who can't manage, it just depends on your team. It just depends on your players. It depends on your front office. Depends on what they want to pay. It depends on so many other things. I mean, the manager, we got the guy here from Baldelli from Tampa. Now, we know that Tampa is a low-paying. We've talked about them. They don't have any fans. They have a terrible stadium, but yet they're always up in it. And so we get Baldelli. First year, he was good. Last year, the whole thing fell apart for a number of reasons. Pitchers, why in the world they would get rid of Barrios? And now this year, you get Correa, big money. They were able to dump Donaldson, and then now Sonny Gray, who's kind of
hold on, Mr. Scott. How do you get us to talking about baseball in the middle of a football conversation?
Well, I guess we're talking about. I guess I was more from coaching, from the idea of coaching to and ability to coach and not both.
But the baseball doesn't have a Rooney Rule. That's the difference.
Yeah, that's true.
But to kind of go on here, let's see, the Panthers, they're willing to bring back Cam. Cam was 0-5.
Cam was horrible.
So what's next for the Panthers after striking out on the Watson sweepstakes there, Mike?
They're going to have to draft a quarterback. I don't even understand why anybody would bring back. I mean, Cam Newton, unless you're like specializing Cam Newton into specific like running roles or a gadget kind of player. But as a quarterback, he's done. I mean, PJ Walker of all people came in and replaced Cam Newton. So I mean, Cam Newton was good when he was in his day before the injuries and those kind of things, but he is not a quarterback anymore. And I don't have a problem with him doing running plays and using as a gadget guy, but man, if you're thinking he's going to be your quarterback, you got a long road ahead of you.
What do you think about the Panthers talking about bringing Cam back there, Mr. Scott?
I agree. I mean, from what I saw last year, I was just, man, that was just hard to watch. I mean, from what he was to what he went to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And so for what he is now, I can't see it. Unless they don't want to pay anybody and they're desperate and they want to take a flyer on it. Other than that, they need to draft somebody. They definitely need to draft a quarterback and start over.
Bill, are the Panthers drafting the quarterback? Are they moving up?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say yes to some extent to everything. I think they are. They had to survive sort of a really rough time because they had, I think, coaches in some cases that their main qualification being close to the head coach. But I think now with the staff is currently constituted, I think we'll see a better coaching staff there.
Yeah, I mean they restructured McCartney's contract. They got what's the wide receiver there?
DJ Moore or
yeah,
Robbie Anderson?
DJ Moore. They restructured his contract also, so he's going to be there. Bill, the Saints, they grabbed Andy Dalton. Now, we were all wondering what they were going to do with all that money that they cleared under the cap. I'm still wondering what's going on. They moved Tyson back to tight end. Are they also going to take a quarterback? I mean, we don't even know whether James is going to be able to throw. Bill?
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is yes, he will be able to, unless you're hearing something I'm not hearing.
No, I'm not, I'm hearing the same thing, but what I'm saying is, he still has to go through a period of, like adjustment. Andy Dalton's going to be there before, you had Tyson running your gadget plays and whatnot. He still might, but basically now he's designated as a tight end as he should be. So your two quarterbacks on the roster now are what? Jameis and Andy Dalton.
Yep. And Andy Dalton has now entered into the part of his career where he is going to be a bridge or a quarterback who is holding a spot for someone else. The next guy, whoever you say is who they're hoping to get. And they know what these guys are. When someone is at this point in their career, you should know what you are. The league definitely knows what you are. And he's being, that's how he's being treated. Though he's made, look up his salary, in his career. He's done very well for himself. I don't think we need to collect, like a second offering or whatever for Brother Dalton.
Mr. Scott, what do you think about the Saints and their quarterback situation?
Well, Dalton was with Cincinnati forever. Never, and then you see this kind of a similar thing with Stafford in Detroit.
Well,
but
he played a few games for the Cowboys too.
Yeah,
he won a couple, didn't he?
Yeah, he at the very end, I think he won a couple games.
Yeah,
he did. But to think he's going to make one of those kind of big turnarounds, he's clearly a backup, and I want to see what Jameis can do. I mean, let's make him the man, and let's get him out there, and let's get him a good offense around him, some receivers. I really want to see what he can do. I mean, this is the time for him to show all the promise that he came out with. I mean, top draft choice, top college quarterback. I think this is the time to see what he can do. And so if he doesn't do it now, I think they roll the dice with him. I would, but I guess we'll see.
Well, you still got Kamara, you still got Thomas. I think they signed a left tackle for him. So we'll see what they do. What's your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I do agree that Andy Dalton's time is done as a starting quarterback unless it's an emergency situation. And as far as Jameis Winston, I liked what he did last year. I thought he played pretty well. Wasn't so reckless with the ball, but he wasn't also doing outside of like 2 games. I think he had 1 5 touchdown game, and I think a 3 touchdown game. When those are great games, but for the most part, it was like 1 touchdown and 180 yards, 200 yards, that kind of thing. But he wasn't turning over the ball like he did with Tampa Bay and just making a whole lot of mistakes. He was also running more, which I like to see out of him as well. So I want to see what Jameis Winston can do. Hopefully he can bounce back from this injury and sort of go back to how he was in the beginning of 2021 and just finish the season as their starting quarterback. As far as Taysom Hill goes, we'll see. I mean, Adam Troutman's the tight end there now. They definitely want to get him involved. This will be his 3rd season in the league. And Taysom Hill is sort of just that wild guy. You can put him anywhere, do anything, and he'll probably remain as the gadget dude.
Yeah, I would imagine. Mike, Colts owner Irsay, Jim Irsay, said that Matt Ryan is what the franchise needs. He also blasted his former quarterback Carson Winston after the trade, calling the move to bring him to Indy a mistake.
Yep.
He questioned Winston's leadership, but after that tirade, are the Colts still viable trading partners? I mean, the next time you go to a guy, another team with a trade, it's like, well, wait a minute. You call this guy garbage after you trade him to us. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way, but that's true. I did not like Irsay's temper tantrum about this whole situation at all, which really kind of subscribed to what I've thought from the very beginning after this whole Carson Wentz talk about, Colts are going to make a change, blah, blah, blah. I knew it was all about Irsay being embarrassed, and rightfully so. I don't blame him for being embarrassed against Jacksonville. That should never, ever, ever, ever have happened. And so, yeah, he was embarrassed, but you got to get over it. You got to move on. And luckily, this tantrum didn't cost them Sam Ehlinger being their starting quarterback this year, because that very easily could have been the situation. I think the Colts got very, very lucky with Matt Ryan, and he bailed them out. And so, yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do is say, hey, what we traded to you is garbage. That's not something teams are going to want to celebrate. But yeah, I don't know how much serious that's going to take it, because anybody who saw Wentz this season knew that he wasn't all that bad. He really wasn't. And I think it was just the fact that Irsay didn't want Wentz to come in Indianapolis. I think that was Ballard and Reich, and Irsay said, okay, you guys think he's the guy, then we'll roll with it. Then it didn't work out. It just didn't. But it doesn't mean it's not going to work out in year 2. So it didn't work out. He got embarrassed in the last game of the season and was like, nope, I don't care what you guys think. He's gone. I don't want this guy. He's out of here. And opened his mouth way too much.
What's he going to say about T.Y.?
Yeah. Poor T.Y. He's gonna try. Oh man, the guy couldn't stay healthy for the last 3 years. What's wrong with him? Why do we pay him all this money?
Yeah, I mean, talk about being a horse trader there. What did you think about that tirade, Bill?
I think Bill's out.
Is Bill gone?
He's there, but I think he privacy mode. Yep.
Well, what did you think, Mr. Scott, when an owner talks about the player that he's just traded? I mean, what would the Vikings say about Kirk Cousins? But go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Well, Kirk Cousins.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, I've scathed Big Ben for the last 2 years. I mean, I've had Ursi type tirades about Big Ben, but when it comes to trading partners, and now that everybody in NFL has heard this, what do you think is it going to be hard for the coach to find trading partners?
I, that one I don't know. I mean, I think the Colts, they're glad they got rid of Carson Wentz. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing with them because I've already said what I thought about the North Dakota quarterbacks and why Washington would even want him is kind of a mystery to me too. They're trying to rebuild. They've changed their name. They really want to get started. And I mean, the thing about Wentz, when I say fool's gold, to me, he's the epitome of it because he looks the part. I mean, he really should be a good quarterback, and he was good in North Dakota. But the pro game just has not moved. He hasn't moved the needle in the pro game.
I thought Washington would have done fine if they had kept Heineke myself and let him develop. But
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. He was, he showed.
is Wentz an improvement over Heineke, Mike?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Heineke is good. I mean, if you're looking at just the traits alone, Heineke is much more mobile. But if you're looking at arm strength, that goes to Wentz. Decision making goes to Carson Wentz. Seeing the field better goes to Carson Wentz.
I'm looking down the line. I'm looking. If I'm going to take a player that I mean, it's not that they paid a lot for Carson Wentz, but I mean,
He kind of reminds me of like a Case Keenum. I mean, Heineke, he can have moments but is he your guy?
No. And Heineke's not that young either. I know he's only been in the league. I mean, he's only been like a couple years as someone getting noticed.
He came in like 28,
29.
Right?
Yeah, like 28, 29 years old.
Yep. So, yeah.
Bill, what did you think, Bill, about Irsay's remarks after he got rid of Wentz? I mean, the, the next team he goes to, I mean, T.Y. Hilton's going to be out there. I mean, what's he going to say about T.Y.? For sale, cheap, can't stay healthy. I mean, what's the tag going to be on him? And I mean, how do you find trading partners after you go on that type of tirade, Bill?
Yeah, I Irsay is once again a different kind of cat. He's a little different from most owners.
Definitely.
I'm not sure what fuels. I mean, I can guess what fuels some of the things he said. He has acknowledged that he likes to alter his consciousness at times, but
I can imagine. He's definitely that dude.
didn't he spend like a year of his life or close to it? Like he somehow, well, I guess when you're rich, you can do anything. But didn't he somehow get himself a job as like a roadie with a rock band or something like that? Am I imagining this?
I don't know for sure, but I don't doubt that because he's very much that way. So I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't doubt that for a second.
Yeah. So like I said, I remember seeing this. This was some years back, but I mean, I don't care when it was. Like, he just does things that are just different.
Yep.
And sometimes it's things that are different in a good way. This is something that's different in not a way that helps your team on any level. So once again, it's nice, I guess, to be ultra rich. A lot of owners do this. The question, but most of them do it quietly. You know what I mean? Like that's the difference. Yes, a lot of owners are like, man, that guy sucked. I mean, that happens all the time, but you don't hear about it. That's the difference is that, the data security or whatever term you want to use wasn't solid. Pick a way to describe it. And yeah, leaky. I don't know, whatever, pick a term.
Yeah, it was rumored that Jim Irsay said that Carson Wentz was not the dude, or did not like Carson Wentz as a leader, or it's always like it was rumored, and that was probably what was said.
Well,
But
now you don't have to worry about it being rumored now. I mean,
you
yeah,
take that rumor right out and throw it out the door because
Bill, the clown said that they're not really in a hurry to move on from Baker Mayfield. They still have his contract, but they did bring in Brissett as the backup for Watson. So, Bill, are we playing? Marco Polo with Baker Mayfield? Maybe he'll play next year for the Browns. Maybe he'll be playing for the Texans. Maybe he'll be in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously known that they are open to trading him. I don't think that's breaking news by any stretch of the imagination. They are very much open to the idea of trading Baker Mayfield. Like, that's been established. The question, or a question, is one: will anyone meet their asking price? Thus far, no one has. So, unless they drop the price, he's not going anyplace. And supposedly, they want to unload all of his unpaid part of his contract. So, one, they want more in compensation than teams willing to give them, and they want the teams to whom they move him to pick up the entirety of his contract and not pay any of themselves. So, if they stick to that, he's not going anyplace. There's absolutely no place. There's no place for him to go if he sticks to that. Their best chance is for a team that's a contender to get to week 9 or whatever, off to a good season and lose their starting quarterback, right, due to injury or whatever. That's their best opportunity. And then, even then, they might have to come off of what their current asking price is a little bit, but they'll get closer to what they wanted. That's that scenario. Outside of that, he's going to be playing for the Browns until further notice.
Mr. Scott, we talked about this last week. The Browns want a number 1 pick for Baker Mayfield. I mean, really? And now they want you to pick up his salary too? I mean, it's kind of like the Jimmy G situation, or maybe the Matt Ryan situation where, are you going to pay him to carry a clipboard? Because you've clearly moved on from him.
Yeah, it's who's desperate for a starter. I mean, because that's obviously what he wants to do, or thinks that's who he is. But I think it's interesting too, and listening to your comments, as a host, how you feel about. We can hear about certain teams that they have your nicknames, the Ratbirds and the Clown. I thought that was very, it's very revealing.
It's been revealed ever since the show's been on, Mr. Scott. Cleveland are always going to be the Clowns. Cincinnati's always going to be the Bungles. And the Ravens will always be the Ratbirds. That's a given.
Okay. It goes with the territory. Okay. Yeah. But what I think about Baker, like I said, he messed up in the beginning, demanding trades. I said he didn't have the panache to be demanding. I mean, he's not in demand by anybody else in the league, just in his words and where he's at. So it looks like he'll be a backup with your team, as you refer to them, the Clowns.
What's your thoughts on that, Mike? Like I said, they brought in Brissett to be the backup, actually, for Deshaun. I think the only thing that we're waiting on, we've heard rumors, but we don't know for sure how many games that Deshaun's going to be absent for one reason or another. But Carolina ain't calling.
Nope. They said nope, we don't want you, and he's like, I don't want you guys either. So yeah, I think this has everything to do with Deshaun Watson. They just have no idea what's coming down the pipe from the NFL, whether it's going to be a full season, whether it's going to be more than that. And yeah, Jacoby Brissett is there, but he is not a starting quarterback for a full season. So kind of guy. Now, if it was a couple weeks here and there, and then yeah, Brissett's, okay, he can get somewhat the job done, but they're hanging on to Baker Mayfield until they find out exactly what this Deshaun Watson outcome is going to be. And once they find that out, then we'll see some clearing going on with Baker Mayfield, where he lands, what team he lands on, outside of course, Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, what did they gave Deshaun, what, $209 million guaranteed? I don't think you put Baker's salary on top of that.
And I don't know exactly the financials, but there is the first year of Deshaun Watson isn't. I think it's predicated on the situation, or there's some kind of situation where they would only pay Deshaun Watson whatever it is, the minimum or whatever it may be, because they have that protection in case he is suspended for that whole season. So they are protected. I don't know exactly the details, but they would be able to, have Baker Mayfield play for one more season and have that contract and fit because of it.
How does that work, Bill?
How does which part work?
The Deshaun, was it $206 million guaranteed, $208 million guaranteed?
Oh, okay, the guaranteed portion. I mean, it could be more than that. There are what do you call it? Escalators. Incentives and escalators, right? Written into the contract. I mean, if certain things happen, I think virtually all of it can become guaranteed, actually. But that's contingent upon them having a certain level of success, him starting, I guess not missing game. I mean, so it's things written into the contract. But yes, it is a premium. I mean, pick a term. Pick a term. So the way it breaks down is the signing bonus by itself is $44,965,000. So the moment he signed, right, that if nothing else happens, he has that, right? I mean, if he breaks his leg in training camp or whatever happens, for some reason he isn't able to actually show up and play, he still keeps that money. That money is his forever. The average salary, I mean, it's a amazing contract. And then so the first year, the base salary, as people have discussed, is only $1,035,000 because he only loses based on proration whatever amount that first year based on that first year, right? And then they're on the hook for $46 million the year after that, 46 after that, 46 year after that, and his cap hit is unbelievable. So to put it in perspective, the lowest dead cap he will have in the length of his contract, the lowest will be $54,993,000 in the final year of the deal, which is 2026. So it is a very large, and the first year, right? So let me put it this way: the first year, his cap hit is only $10,028,000. So if you want to cut him, it's year one, because after that, the cap hit is very, very large. It's a fascinating contract considering what things aren't known.
Yeah, very fascinating considering.
Well, how can you cut people with a guaranteed contract? I mean, you can cut them, but you still got to pay them, don't you?
You got to pay them, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you still got to pay them. Yeah. we've talked about the greatest contract in sports history quite a few times, right, Bill?
It comes up.
You might want to look up his contract, Mr. Scott. That's whose contract is that, Bill?
Bobby Bonilla.
Bobby? No. Whose contract is that, Bill?
Well, I mean, it depends on which sport. But if we're talking football, I mean, obviously Patrick Mahomes has a pretty nice
No,
little
no,
contract.
the one that we were talking. I think it was baseball. We were talking about the greatest contract ever.
I think that is Bobby Bonilla we were talking about then.
Yeah. Okay.
And I said they should make Bobby Bonilla Day a national holiday.
When did he last play? I can't. 20 years. It's like, yeah.
Yes, more than 20 years now, but yes.
I think it goes until like 2035 too. Or something to that effect.
Yeah. The greatest contract, sports contract ever. Mr. Scott, as you know, Lamar Jackson's agent is his mother. How do you feel about the way that Lamar is handling his upcoming extension with the Ratbirds? Should he be taking their calls, or as should he be betting on himself? And hey, I got another year on this one, and I'm thinking about breaking the bank now that you guys have paid Deshaun Watson. What's your thoughts on that, Mr. Scott?
Well, last I heard, I thought he was happy in Baltimore.
He is. He says he is, but
that's what I heard.
Being happy and being compensated are two different things.
Well, I mean, I think that's opening up the door. He's saying that he's happy to be there. So, you got to open up your wallet. I'm happy to be here. And, I mean, he's a franchise quarterback. I mean, I'm sure they want to keep him. I mean, if they can open up the bank for Kirk Cousins, with a great, I would take Lamar Jackson over Kirk Cousins any day. Not that Kirk Cousins is a terrible quarterback, but Lamar Jackson can just do a little bit more. He has the arm, he has the throwing ability, but he has the mobility on top of it that Cousins doesn't have. So I think he's got leverage. I mean, if you want to win, you got to pay these guys. That seems to be how it goes. If I was him, I think I'd do the same thing.
Matt, do you take that? I mean, Mike, do you take that call, or do you put him on hold?
I think it's very interesting, his whole thing. I mean, even his whole demeanor is interesting to me. He's just like, whenever whatever they do, I'm here, and it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of effort into trying to get this done. And I think that's different, but also I like that. I like that kind of approach where I'm gonna stay. I'm not gonna play a single game for you until I'm played, and all this other stuff that players like to, come out and be demanding. So I do. It's different, but I have that respect for him. But I also think Baltimore is in a quandary too, where they're like, okay, well, he's really good, and we win with him, but one leg injury, and we're right there with how we were with how Washington was with RG3. He hasn't really been what he was when he won the MVP and took the league by storm. And the last 3 weeks of his season of last year, they implemented cover zero, and he couldn't figure out his way out of a paper bag. So I think both are trying to figure this whole thing out, and it's an interesting situation, a lot more than any other preseason kind of outlook. So in the end, I do think Lamar Jackson rightfully will get paid. It's just going to be determined on how long and what that actual number is going to be.
Bill, are we going to keep talking mama jokes, or is he going to hire a professional agent?
Okay, my first question is, if he gets a contract that is at or very close to the one that Patrick Mahomes
That'd be
signed.
crazy.
You want to calculate what 3% of that is? He's keeping that 3% as opposed to giving it to somebody else.
That's true.
Right. So, and if he gets a contract that's, like I said, close to, if it's not exceeding, but if it's even close to, if it's 95% of what was in Mahomes' contract, he gets. Why would I be critical? And you're keeping all of it.
Hey, keeping it in the family. I definitely understand. And so far, it's working out for him. Bill, give us your final thoughts for this evening, my man. Always good to have you on. Tell us what's going on.
So much is going on. So we are getting closer and closer to this. I guess I actually went back to my records. I guess it's actually 8th annual mock draft of Palooza. 16 GMs, each one with one AFC and one NFC team. 7 rounds of mock drafting that will happen the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, prior to the NFL draft. I have I'm putting the finishing touches on my database of 400 prospects. So I have to get heights, weights, speeds, 3-cone times, and bench reps and all that kind of stuff. God willing, I'll be done with that this weekend. I'm on a bunch of people's shows, and I'll be doing something for some regional offshoot of ESPN, ESPN Bay Area, I think, something like that, to talk about possible guys that the 49ers could use. That's going to be tomorrow, I think.
Nice.
It's all starting to blur together. Emery Hunt, who, if you don't know, you should get to know, will be joining us on Nuts and Bolts Draft Central. We're going to have the first female scout, Connie Carberg, will be joining us in the near future. We're working on getting Amy Trask, the first woman to work in an NFL front office, should be joining us on Draft Central, hopefully in the near future. Got articles dropping, sort of reaction piece around some of the things that Deion Sanders said and some of the issues he pointed to. And
that was pretty awesome.
Right. And how, frankly, the fact that, one, he did it, and 2, there's some, heat and light being generated around it is, to me, actually a sign of progress.
Yes.
But yeah, my final thought goes back to Todd Bowles. There was a time when if you were unsuccessful, particularly if you were very unsuccessful as a black head coach, that was it. Now you go back to being a coordinator forever. So I was very happy and very pleased and very excited to see him get a second bite at the apple. And I'm with a decent franchise. I mean, obviously the team is going to lose something from where it was last year because of the salary cap and other things. But unlike the first time he got to be a head coach, he's not set up to fail. Shout out to everybody who's coached the Jets the last, 40 or so years. That's a tough way to go, man. I mean, Parcells had a little bit of a successful run there. And even Pete Carroll, though people, like to sort of take shots about his time, he was I think, a game over 500 in his time, or right around 500 which, I mean, if somebody coaches more than 1 year and their record is 500 or more, I mean, we talked about building statues. You ought to at least consider it, at least a large plaque. It is incredibly difficult to win there. It has been incredibly difficult to win there for a very long time. I won't get into, they have a whole big thing going on with Washington. It's not quite that bad, but their culture isn't the best, as you apparently have heard. Their culture isn't the best. They have an owner who is only semi-interested in this version of football, right? He's become very interested in the English Premier League and is putting a lot of his time, energy, and money into that. His other football team. I mean, there's a bunch of things going on with that team. So shout out to Todd Bowles for finally getting another chance to prove, and I think he will prove successfully, that he actually is a person who deserved to be a head coach, and I think will succeed. And hopefully that will help to wear away at this glacial approach to increasing the number of black head coaching candidates. That's my final thought.
Mr. Scott, as always, good having you on the show. We appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
I'm getting, I don't know. we're going to have to start meeting like this on Mondays and Thursdays, Mr. Scott. Uh, or at least I miss you on Saturdays. But what's your final thoughts for tonight?
Well, I just have one final thought. What I was thinking of doing is taking Duke and giving you the field.
Ooh.
I'm
Ooh,
thinking about that.
ooh.
Yeah.
Well. Let me know when you get that thought together.
I'm thinking because this has been such a, this has been such a winning streak that I've had. I mean, there's
I love
nothing
it.
wrong with padding pockets, and
Yeah.
I love keep continuing to pad pockets, pocketing, So I'll let you know about it. I'm considering
Yeah.
that. I think that you'd fall for that, and I think that
I
that
think
idea.
I think I might. I think I
Yeah.
might.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
just let's sleep on that and see
yeah.
what, and we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch about that. That's
We definitely will. A lot of our enemies have underestimated us, and that's why we wear these wings with the skulls on them. But yeah, you keep thinking about that. uh, that's a pleasure as always, Mr. Scott. I'll see you either Saturday or Monday, but always a pleasure. Mike, take us home here, man.
Yes, sir. And it's always a pleasure, of course. We don't have Demetrius tonight, but definitely in my thoughts, and love having this guys with you guys. My final thought is in 2018, United States soccer team lost to Trinidad and Tobago, a country that couldn't even have one name. They have to have two. They're so bad. And did not qualify for the World Cup. This season, they made up for it for 2022. They were so far ahead of things that the last game they kind of just mailed it in. They ended up losing, but it didn't really matter.
Well, they had to lose by 6 goals to be disqualified.
Right. I mean, it was just one of those things, right? That they didn't have to. So they lost 0-2, but they still qualified, and now they have to escape the group of death. Well, hopefully they don't get into it like they did in 8 years ago, so 2014, and that really hurt them quite a bit being in that group. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing this World Cup coming next summer, and we'll see how it all unfolds. But I'm pretty excited for this United States team to finally get over that awful hump of 4 years ago.
All right, guys. Well, hey, as always, great Thursday evening. Always enjoy talking sports, and we'll see you next week, everyone. Have
Take
a great
care.
night. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Oh, Bill, when does